This is the brick building, the Boca Raton Innovation Campus. Once the headquarters of IBM, it became the birthplace of the first personal computer on August 12, 1981. Dave Bradley, responsible for both hardware and software development, remembers when he got the call to join IBM.
I was astounded when I got a phone call from somebody in Boca Raton, Florida, saying, "We'd like you to come down to interview." And I'm in West Lafayette, Indiana. It's January. And I said, "How soon do you want me down there?" After I get off the phone, we get out the Rand McNally Road Atlas so we can look up where Boca is and this. And my wife says, "I don't care what they offer you. If it's janitor, take the job."
Pete Martinez became engineering manager for the new product.
I was hired in 1975, like Dave. But the difference was I had no background at all in computers. I studied in electrical engineering at the University of Miami, and at that point in time, it was mostly power and communication. So it was Florida Power and Light or Bell South. IBM comes recruiting on campus, and I said, well, it's just so that I can show my mom the business card from a recruiter from IBM. So I go through the interview process, and 2 days later, I get this call and said, "Pete, we signed you up for 5 interviews with engineering managers at IBM Boca Raton." I don't even know where Boca Raton is on the map. So I drive up here, one of the longest days of my life, because it was really, really intense. You know, you're drawing circuits on the board. I had put myself through school in an engineering company, but primarily construction, so I knew nothing about computers. So every time somebody started drawing a circuit on the board, I would ask them the question before they asked me. They thought that was genius. And I'm driving back home to Miami and said, "Please don't do this thing ever again." It was the longest day of my life. 2 days later, I get a call from the recruiter, said, "Pete, wonderful news. You have 2 job offers from engineering managers in Boca Raton." I said, "I thought we had talked about this before." And to IBM's credit, within 3 months, I was doing some level of design in CPUs and mini computers at the time.
When you came down here, Boca wasn't the way it is today. Tell me the lay of the land. You talked about it earlier.
One of the things I remember from that time is the Boca Chamber of Commerce ran ads in some of the slick magazines advertising the fact that in Boca Raton, 1 out of 43 people were millionaires. I did not raise that average when I came down here. But it was still very much a seasonal place. IBM was still fairly small, so it was still very much people came down here, lived in Royal Palm, they came down, stayed at the hotel and club. In the summer, they used to joke that you could fire a cannon down Federal Highway right in front of what is now the Historical Society, and you wouldn't hit anybody. Suddenly you have all these people of childbearing age arriving, and they want goods and services associated with that. They had to build schools. They had to do lots of things. If you wanted to go to the mall, there was this rinky-dink Boca Mall in the center of town, but if you wanted anything decent, you drove down to Pompano to go to the Pompano Fashion Mall.
Why do you think that IBM came down here? Why was it such an ideal location?
The rumor associated with why IBM came down here is that Thomas Watson Jr. had a condo in Palm Beach, and he wouldn't be able to justify his trips down here to write them off as a business expense.
You're looking at a small portable computer called the IBM 5100. It's helping a lot of different people do their work more productively. It weighs about 50 pounds.
The computer became an instant success. According to IBM folklore, the original team that conceived of the computer included 12 IBM engineers, one of them said to be Dave Bradley.
In September of 1980, I joined a group, the 12th of 12 engineers, that did the original hardware design of the IBM PC. But 12 people weren't all that was involved. There were many more that were involved. There were programmers, there were manufacturing guys, sales, marketing, all sorts of other people. And once we got going, we hired many more engineers. So by the time the PC was announced in August of '81, there were probably 500 people working for Don Estridge in that particular effort. But the myth is there were 12 of us, and I was one of them. I think the IBM PC changed the industry, changed the way people viewed computers. But we were the first company that actually made you believe that this thing might work. It might be useful for something. I always used to tell people back at that day, you're buying for your corporation, you've got some sort of company, you want to buy something that's going to be reliable, dependable.
But the most significant impact of the personal computer was not in the home or the office computer. It was the impact that it had across multiple industries. If you think of it, it became a banking terminal, the ATM. It became the controller inside your gas pump in the gas station. It became the reservation terminal for travel. It became the student or the research platform for continuous research. So it expanded way across, including education.
We kept the personal computer development extremely secret. Supposedly, you weren't even supposed to tell your spouse, your children. No, I can't tell you what I'm working on because this is so secret. Right. If you were running a small business in Boca, it's unlikely that you knew anything about what IBM was doing.
So secret. Everything was so secret.
IBM was very secret about the things they developed that time. You weren't allowed to bring a camera on site. You had to have a special camera pass if you were taking pictures, and of course that had to be approved at the highest level. You weren't allowed to carry magnetic media around, like a diskette or now a USB thumb drive, because they were afraid people would take secrets out like that. All our documentation was stamped secret, had to be locked away at night, even though there's badge readers on all the doors. That was just the way IBM viewed it at that time.
IBM took care of its employees and their families.
IBM would have these big family days out on the athletic field in the area there where they essentially, it was a county fair. They'd bring in some rides, things for the kids to do. There would be a Christmas party. And of course, since the whole families, including the kids, are coming to these things, it was a big community kind of event.
When I took the responsibility of the senior exec, we had really poor morale. And as a matter of fact, because the consciousness was always, are they going to close Boca? Are we going to have to move? Are they going to do away with my job? So everybody was looking at the door. When they offered me the position, I said, first of all, is there a predisposition here that I got to shut this site down? The guy says, no, it's your business. You grow it, it's yours. I said, that's all I wanted to know. So the first thing I did was measure the morale of the population. I think it was probably the worst in the whole company. And I said, it's good to understand where you're starting from. So we started creating employee-led initiatives, a sports league, a luncheon, an event, a recognition thing, a this and that. All of a sudden, the employees are all involved in the creation of the future thing, another family did. We run the same survey a year later. It was the #1 site in the company.
Dave Bradley was responsible for the development of the Ctrl-Alt-Delete function. Users would press Ctrl-Alt and Delete simultaneously, resetting the computer without turning off the power. This simple yet powerful function became the industry standard.
Ctrl-Alt-Delete came about because as we're doing the development, it's brand new hardware, brand new software, things would break quite frequently. And generally, the way you had to do it, fix that problem, was you would turn it off, wait a few seconds, turn it back on, and wait for it to go through a power-on self-test, in which this is IBM, we're going to build a reliable, dependable machine. That took a while. And so, just for us developers, let's do a quick way of doing it. So I was writing the code for the keyboard, turning all these keystrokes into things that would then appear on the screen. So I'll just pick these three keys, which are way far apart on the original keyboard. The only way you could hit them by mistake is if you sat on the keyboard.
Right.
And it'll quickly reboot the machine. We'll skip over the power on self-test because you don't have to do all of that in the debug phase. We'll just get back to where we were. And so all the people developing the machine knew about that. It was a way to work on it. The original IBM PC, diskette drives. VisiCalc comes on a diskette. EasyWriter, which is the word processing program, comes on a diskette. You'd put in the diskette and you would boot it up to run that particular program. If you wanted to change programs, you had to change diskettes. The pubs people who are writing the manuals for this said, how do we tell people how to do this? And the answer was simple. You put in the diskette, you hit Ctrl-Alt-Delete, by magic your program starts running. And so they put it in the pubs. Now everybody knows about it.
So Ctrl-Alt-Delete was actually a signal to the computer to actually run something else.
The Ctrl-Alt-Delete signal was the moral equivalent of unplugging the computer and plugging it back in quickly,
Right.
as opposed to taking a long time to do it.
Boca Raton became one of the nation's leading hubs for innovation.
E-business, that was here. Speech recognition was here. As a matter of fact, most people don't realize that the original application for speech recognition was not a talking car or Alexa or the call centers. It was the physically impaired, the people that could not see a screen or touch a keyboard. And we said, how do we enable these people into education and to the workforce by providing them? And then once we got very comfortable with the technology, then we started expanding it out to the commercial world.
You're making it sound like this area has been rich in terms of innovators.
For a couple of reasons. One, the talent, but also there's a spirit of innovation that has to happen. But it was the spirit that we captured, and the community was very, very much in lockstep with us, because the schools, the community, the churches, everything rallied around the community because IBM was at the leading edge of that. But if you look at the variety of different products and services that we create out here, it's more than 500 easily. So it created a candy store for somebody with an interest in innovation to stay here.
What were some of the most significant projects you worked on during your time?
Actually, the ones that had social impact. We started working with the FBI and the Center for Missing and Exploited Children, where they were taking the picture of a 3-year-old, but now they're looking for a 9-year-old that has disappeared for 6 months, for 6 years. So we started going through, working with the FBI and says, can we codify, turn into algorithms, your thought process for morphing these pictures? So they taught us out. So we started developing the technology, working with them, and all of a sudden, what would take 2 highly skilled FBI artists to morph one picture of one kid would take them a week. We got it down to 1 hour with incredible accuracy. So the first girl that we took through the process was a girl that had been abducted 6 years previously from Virginia. We put out the picture, the enhanced picture, and you remember the posted cards, have you seen me? Okay? So we put it on the mailer. Within 24 hours, there's 36 sightings of the child. Within 2 days, the kid is back home, parental abduction, living in Montana with one of the parents. And you look at the picture of the kid, and you look at the kid, and the only difference was the hairdo. We couldn't predict the hairdo.
Here's Tiffany's picture at the time of her abduction. And here is the computer progression image of Tiffany as she was projected to appear 3 years later. Incidentally, here's how Tiffany looked shortly after she was recovered.
These were the kind of projects that IBM never asked me for a budget. They just said, do it. This is too important. These are the kind of things that create social impact. So it didn't have a product name. It was never associated with it. It was just the leverage of the technology. The posture of IBM Boca Raton at the time, which was very much on the leading edge innovation, wild ducks we were called, during a period of time, primarily because we were fearless. Fearless, knowing that you couldn't take both feet off the ground. There was a consciousness of quality, and there were some people that didn't make it along the way. But the few that did make it, you had a tremendous responsibility on your shoulders, because you were representing an awful lot of companies and families and technologies. You fail one time, you get to go to the back of the line. So it was interesting.
IBM encouraged bold thinking. Creativity was paramount. Engineers were given a blank piece of paper to draw on.
There's no more wonderful experience than when you get a blank sheet of paper, you define your job, and you got to prove that you can do that. So I was in heaven for most of this time.
The blank sheet of paper is tremendously enticing. That's what we got with the PC. Didn't have to make it fit with anything else that IBM had done. And that's an engineer's dream.
And that was the Renaissance, the beauty of ideas. So innovation happens at the intersection of ideas, not at the expertise of ideas.
I see in your eyes that when the innovation stopped, you became uncomfortable. And almost you had grown so high that you dealt with management rather than the love of your life, which was innovation.
As a matter of fact, to that point, I really enjoyed the most when I had very small groups like the 12 that were a cult, that became really trusting innovation, pushing the envelope and such. The moment the organizations got very large, while it might be good for the ego to look at your name in an org chart for about 2 seconds, after that it's a real pain. So what I've done in this part of my life now is small groups, lots of innovation, lots of very critical development, but with a social impact. I put in everybody's contract, number one line, improve the human condition.